Deep down in our nonviolent creed is the conviction that there are some things so dear, some things so precious, some things so eternally true that they're worth dying for. And if a man happens to be 36 years old, as I happen to be, and some great truth stands before the door of his life, some great opportunity to stand up for that which is right, he's afraid his home will get bombed, or he's afraid that he will lose his job, or he's afraid that he will get shot or beat down by state troopers. He may go on and live until he's 80, but he's just as dead as 36 as he would be at 80, and the cessation of breathing in his life is merely the belated announcement of an earlier death of the spirit. He died. A man dies when he refuses to stand up for that which is right. A man dies when he refuses to stand up for justice. A man dies when he refuses to take a stand for that which is true.
I don't know if the people who need to hear my words will find this, let alone even be willing to listen. I've sat here for nearly a year now, trying to write these words, and I keep finding my mind in a state of outright terror. I'm filled with a fear so powerful and overwhelming, and anxiety so uncontrollable that for the last year, just the thought of making this video has left me laying awake at night questioning if it's even worth it, if anyone will even care to hear anything I have to say. This is not a fear of losing friends over differing opinions, or a fear of some fictitious evil secret within me being exposed. It is a genuine fear that our furry community, that our world, and that humanity itself has devolved beyond saving. It is a fear that hatred and violence has taken over, that hashtags and sensationalism have replaced honesty and civil interaction, and that understanding, forgiveness, and compassion have all become a taboo. It is a fear that we no longer value truth. It is a fear that we no longer value integrity. It is a fear that there is no hope for this world, and it is a fear that there may be no reason for me to remain in it. But despite these feelings of hopelessness, somewhere inside the darkness that has been filling me, there is a small, smoldering ember barely glowing, and it has refused to go out. And so until it does, I need to at least try. I need you to understand something about me. I've never been able to come out to my family about my sexuality or rely on them for any kind of emotional support. When I was a kid, I was never able to go to them when I needed help, or when I was struggling with what I later learned as an adult was anxiety and depression. I'm 30 now, but I was in the 4th grade when I remember first having suicidal thoughts because of the endless bullying at school. Between an emotionally absent father, sisters that would bully me and exclude me from everything, and a mother that ignored me and would also blame me for fights that my sisters started, I was always an outcast. From my earliest memories as a child up until I found the fandom, I had no one I could rely on or turn to for help. Until the end of high school, I was crying myself to sleep nearly every single night because I was completely alone. The furry fandom was the closest thing to a home I had ever found. I felt infinitely closer to the friends I had made in the fandom than I ever did my own biological family. As Further Confusion 2020 came to a close, as the final song of the final dance ended, I hugged one of my friends and I cried. Through my tears, I thanked him for helping to give me the best weekend of my life I had ever had. It was there on that dance floor that I learned what it was like to truly feel loved and accepted by others, and what it was like to be happy. It was then that I knew that my friends were my family. But even within our fandom, I still couldn't escape the same petty bullying I experienced in high school. I had learned as a child that I needed to stand up for myself because I never had anyone else that would do it for me. And so I did, and that only made those who hated me become more desperate in their attempts to ruin me. For years, I have been dealing with endless harassment, rumors, and malicious outright lies being spread about me from behind closed doors, and from Twitter accounts that have me blocked, where I'm unable to see most of these accusations until much too late, let alone be able to defend myself before these rumors spread and did their damage. The lies about me grew more and more extreme and exaggerated with each call-out post made against me. The repeated attacks against me had grown so blatantly dishonest that, to me, they became comical in how desperate they were to try and ruin me. This is why when the latest attempt happened on April 14th, I was quick to dismiss it as more clout chasing and jealousy, because I knew the very things they were accusing me of were absolutely untrue. My immediate response was one of mockery and pride. The new accusations they were making were so extreme and false, I honestly didn't think anyone would actually believe them. I was targeted by members of my own furry community for the alleged crimes of racism, zoo sadism, transphobia, and making excuses for police brutality. For a large part of it, I was completely unaware of the sheer scale of a lot of the rumors going around behind my back. I had been targeted before with false accusations and claims of things I never said or did. The problem, though, is that this time, some people who I thought were friends actually ended up believing these accusations, and not just believing them, but helped spread these false claims like wildfire on Twitter. Things rapidly spiraled out of control. People who I thought were my friends completely turned their backs on me. Some of the friends that gave me the best weekend I had ever lived, the ones that made me feel loved and accepted, just dropped me like nothing. They never tried to talk to me or tried to verify if the accusations were actually true. Some believed them and instantly hated me. Some friends cut all ties with me, and some knew the accusations were not true and that I'm not the bad person the accusations claimed, but still remained silent to protect themselves and the reputations of their Twitch channels, choosing instead to ban me from their channels to, as they put it, avoid confrontation from being associated with me. My tweets immediately after weren't attempts at damage control, as some implied. They were panicked responses when I realized that people were actually believing these accusations, and the sheer number of accusations was just way too many than I could possibly handle through Twitter. I was going to take that weekend to compile a video response, but as the next few days passed, I saw more and more people outright dropping me, banning me, and blocking me. When those accusations came out, I lost countless friends, people that I loved, people that I relied on to mentally keep me going, when they made it crystal clear that they'd happily throw me under the bus in order to protect their own reputations, rather than even try to talk to me. This was the only true home I had ever known, and I felt like I lost everything. I had canceled my streams for that weekend, and I came to terms with the decision of taking my own life. I planned out exactly how I was going to do it, and I had even gone so far as to schedule a tweet to be posted in a few days after I was gone about where emergency services could find my body. I was going to fall asleep in my car in my garage with the engine running and just never wake up. The only reason I'm still here today is because of 4 people that bothered to reach out and talk to me. Ollie, Gran, Pantsu, and Pilot. You 4 genuinely saved my life that week by showing me that someone still cared about me. I've spent nearly a year trying to make this video. It has taken me so long because every time I just think about it, the amount of anxiety and terror it fills me with is beyond overwhelming. I keep questioning if it's even worth it, if anyone will even listen, let alone give a shit. I have no idea how people are going to react to this, how former friends are going to react to this. I already know this is going to cause retaliation from those that have spent years trying to ruin me, and I am terrified that it might be enough for me to just end it all. From my extensive time in the furry fandom and on Twitter, the absolute one truth I have learned is that if the hate mob targets you for something, it doesn't matter if you're innocent, and it doesn't matter if the truth comes out proving your innocence. The harassment and the threats will never stop. The lies and rumors will never stop. And even if you did do wrong and bettered yourself as a person, there is absolutely no action, no apology you can make that will sate the mob that just wants to see you burn. There have been a select group of people in this fandom that have been spreading false accusations about me and gaslighting others into believing I have said or done horrible things that I have literally never done. All in what I believe started as an attempt to make me look like a horrible person, to protect the reputation of another furry that had committed several instances of domestic violence against me. Because of this, and because these events are connected, I feel it is necessary that I first have to go over these incidents in detail to explain what happened before I address the call-out tweet specifically. I wanted so desperately to be rid of these incidents from years past and just move on with my life. But this has been an ongoing issue I've been having to deal with for years. And in order to properly address it, and hopefully make you understand how all this bullshit got started, and what I've been having to deal with for years, I feel I don't have any other choice than to start from the beginning. It was the early hours of December 26, 2015. I was hanging out at a friend's place with my then roommate, Pepper Coyote, his boyfriend and also roommate, Morgears, and our mutual friend, Cosmo. I had not been drinking that night, but Pepper showed up to the friend's place already drunk and continued to drink more while he was there. It was very late, and sometime after 4 a.m., we all left the friend's place and went back to our house with Cosmo. I was inside the house for only a brief moment before Pepper had grabbed me in an unwanted bear hug and had me pinned between himself and a hanging ceiling hammock that was in our living room. The position he had me in had my arm pinched and hurting, so I told him to get off me. I repeated myself a few times, but in typical Pepper fashion, he just ignored it and did what he wanted anyways, something that I learned after living with him was a very common behavior of his. This is when his hand started wandering, and he felt my concealed firearm underneath my shirt. He started grabbing at the firearm and giggling. I immediately pushed his hand away and off of me and my firearm, but he brought it right back and tried grabbing it again. He did this repeatedly, while I kept telling him louder and louder to stop, and to stop treating it like it was a toy. I take firearm safety very seriously. I have taken numerous safety courses, have countless hours at the range, and I even carry a concealed firearms permit, which isn't even required here in the state of Arizona to own or carry a firearm. I have it because, God forbid, should I ever need to defend myself, the Arizona judicial system recognizes that someone that carries that card has not only undergone safety training, but will display a much higher aptitude of judgment in having to use a firearm. And here I am with a 6'6", 230-pound drunken man-child on me, hurting me, and trying to grab at a loaded gun as if it was a playful toy after I repeatedly told him to stop. He eventually got off me, and I yelled at him for being so careless. "What the fuck is wrong with you? This is exactly how people end up getting shot," is what I said to him. If there is one thing I learned about Pepper from living with him, is that he hates being told no, and that he can't do what he wants. Because of this, him and his boyfriend would argue and fight on an almost daily basis when I lived there with them. So naturally, Pepper started yelling back, and he wanted to turn this into an argument. It was late, I was tired, he wanted to argue, and I wanted none of it. So I removed myself from the situation, and went down the hall to my bedroom. Despite removing myself from the situation, Pepper wanted to keep arguing. He chased after me, and he forced himself into my bedroom doorway, preventing me from being able to close it. I told him several times to get out of my room, but he just stood there in the doorway, holding the door open with his foot. He then tried shoving me so he could force his way into my bedroom. I shoved him back so I could close and lock my door, and in his drunken stupor, he fell onto his ass in the hallway. I tried to take the opportunity to close and lock my bedroom door, but he got up and he forced his way through my door, breaking my bedroom door and grabbing me in a headlock and proceeding to choke me out. This is when I swung at him with my right fist over my left shoulder, hitting him square in the nose and knocking him out cold in one hit. He fell to the ground like a sack of bricks. Moore and I made sure that he didn't hit his head, and then I gathered some things and I immediately left the house. I did not feel safe in that house with him after what he just did to me, so I messaged the friend that I was just hanging out with, and thankfully I was able to stay there for a few weeks. This is what is often referred to as, quote, the gun incident between myself and Pepper, and it was the first of 2 major incidents between us. After a few weeks of letting things cool down, Pepper and I had lunch, and we agreed to put the situation behind us and move on. I ended up not moving out because I figured it was just a one-time thing that wouldn't happen again. I even opted to renew the lease on the rental house with them, something I now wish I had never done. What I did not realize at the time was that over the next few months, Moore and Pepper had been going around spreading false stories about what happened between me and Pepper. I should have picked up on this when I had messaged a formerly close friend, someone I had been physically intimate with in the past, about a birthday party they were having where I wasn't invited. I should have picked up on the red flag from their comment when they tried to shift the blame onto me, saying I shouldn't have had my gun out around someone drinking, something I literally didn't do. I never had it out, as it was concealed on my body the entire time. Their comment likely stemmed from one of the false rumors going around about the incident, claiming that I had pulled a gun on Pepper. Some people I've seen spreading the false story even went so far as to claim that I was drunk when I pulled the gun on him, a complete bullshit fabrication of what actually happened. Several months went by and things got progressively worse and worse living with Pepper and his boyfriend. On top of their almost daily yelling and fighting with each other, it was a constant occurrence that they would host parties or have large groups of friends over late at night without ever checking with me first. It was not something that happened just once or twice, it was a repeated occurrence. I had a set weekly schedule with my job, which means I always worked the same days and the same hours every week, including having to get up early on Sunday mornings, which means I couldn't be up late Saturday nights. They knew this, and yet they would still host parties on Saturday nights without ever checking with me. I tried to talk to them about it, and I even told them that if they told me ahead of time, I could see about reworking my Sunday hours to make it work, but they never once checked with me. Moore even used the excuse that he's stressed and he needs fun in his life, and that I should be more considerate of that. A friend of Moore's was present there during that conversation, Diesel Derp, and even he just flat out said, "Moore, no." It got to a point that I was completely fed up with how incredibly selfish and inconsiderate they were as roommates. At a last minute's notice on Saturday, May 21st, 2016, they told me that they were going to have 1 to 2 people over for a friend's birthday. I was not happy about the last minute's notice, but I figured, okay, fine, 1 or 2 people, I can put up with it. I was working later than usual that night, and when I checked my Twitter, I saw that Moore had posted a picture of a party with well over a dozen people in our living room. I immediately messaged him and told him I was fed up with this bullshit and that I wanted everyone out by the time I got home. When I got home, I saw that my message was completely ignored and that over a dozen people were in our living room yelling and drinking while playing Smash Brothers on the TV, a TV that sat right up against my bedroom wall so that anything playing on it could be heard clear as day from inside my bedroom, let alone a dozen people yelling and partying in the living room. I stood in front of the TV and I tried to tell everyone that they needed to leave. I was trying to explain to everyone that Pepper and Moore didn't check with me about this party and that they keep doing this shit and that I'm putting my foot down. I was trying to be heard over all the hyped up yelling of the Smash Brothers game, but no one heard me. Pepper just kept shouting at me that no one cares and no one is leaving. I yelled loudly that I want everyone out now, but Pepper just got in my face and started shoving me and getting me away from standing in front of the TV, all while taunting me that I couldn't do anything about it and that no one was going to leave. He kept shoving me, which is when I shoved him back. He grabbed at me, and then we fell to the ground. Pepper got on top of me and was sitting directly on my chest with his full body weight, making me unable to breathe. I swung up at Pepper in an attempt to get him off of me because I wasn't able to push him off. My punches caused him a bloody nose. It took 2 people to pull him off of me. That was when I got up, went outside, and called the cops. Again, I removed myself from the situation and from him, but the whole time I was outside in the front yard, I heard him yelling and screaming from the inside, trying to taunt me into a fight, even saying things like, "Come on, Karnyth, shoot me," not in a suicidal way, but in an antagonizing way to provoke a fight. After having lived with Pepper for over a year and seeing firsthand how he can get physically aggressive and confrontational when he doesn't get his way, I had anticipated that me standing up to him might incite him to get violent or confrontational. I had left my firearm locked in the glove compartment of my car before I ever went in the house because I fully anticipated he might get violent, and sure enough, he did. The police arrived and I gave them my statement. By that time, a lot of people at the party had cleared out and left. While waiting for the police, Pepper was inside the house, yelling out to me, trying to provoke me into a fight, telling me to shoot him and such. After I spoke with one of the officers, they told me that I could press charges, but because Pepper had a bloody nose, a sign of a physical injury, he could try pressing charges too. At that point, I realized it wasn't worth the hassle and I just wanted to be done with Pepper. The next morning, I rented a U-Haul and I moved everything I owned out of that house. I wanted to wash my hands of him and move on with my life. I wanted nothing more to do with him, and I just wanted to put it all behind me and move on. Now, you, the listener, may be thinking to yourself that it's my word against his, and if you've come here with an already negative predisposition towards me, you may be naturally inclined to believe him over me. And from your perspective, I can understand that. But let me show you a number of public statements Pepper made in the aftermath of all this that shows he outright blatantly lied about a huge number of details of what happened between us in order to paint himself as a victim and me as the bad guy. First, he tries to discredit me when he claims that he let me know that he was going to have people over. As I discussed earlier, he told me last minute that it was going to be specifically 1 or 2 people. Setting aside my grievances with being told last minute, when I got home, he had well over a dozen people partying in our house. He also tried to claim that I worked at noon the next day, implying that I shouldn't have had a reason for wanting people out so early on a Saturday night. That was a blatant lie. I had a set work schedule that was the same every week for over a year that I lived with them. This included having to be up early at 7 a.m. on Sunday mornings. Because this was such a recurring problem, I even told them on numerous occasions that if they just checked with me ahead of time, not last minute, that I could see about reworking my schedule to accommodate them. Despite this, they still never once checked with me first. Next, he claimed that he had to be up for work at 6 a.m. the next day, trying to imply that he had to get up even earlier than me so that I had nothing to complain about. This was another blatant lie because at the time, he was a band teacher for an elementary school. So no, he did not have to work Sunday mornings. Then, in his own words, he absurdly tried to claim that he wasn't drunk or impaired in any way, an attempt to establish credibility to his claims. Ranatoki, a friend of Pepper's who was at the party, tweeted about the incident, and even she stated that he was, quote, drunk as a skunk. Pepper also tried to claim that he was mad that while I lived with them, I brought a gun into the home without ever telling them. I had owned firearms long before I ever moved in with them, and they knew I did before we moved in together. Not only that, but they never once objected to me having it, nor did they ever ask me to keep it locked up or in my car, even though that is what I was already doing regardless. As I mentioned before, I had even locked it in my car in the garage the night of the second incident, anticipating Pepper was going to be confrontational. He is trying to paint me as deceitful and reckless while publicly taking an anti-gun stance to appeal to the fandom, but it's all just more lies. Pepper has never had an issue with guns or people owning guns. When I lived with him, he would frequently ask local friends to take him to the range. He only became anti-gun in the public's eye because it was politically convenient in our largely left-leaning fandom to do so. This whole anti-gun stance to discredit me is 100% performative. And lastly, he tried to claim that he and I had made up and, quote, mutually apologized. This was absolutely a lie. The only apology he ever made to me was in passing at a party where all he said specifically was, sorry things got weird. And that's it. Because yeah, that's a sincere apology for domestic violence and making someone afraid to live in their own home. And no, I never accepted that apology. But then, just hours later, he had the audacity to tweet that he never claimed I accepted the apology, even though he literally said, we mutually apologized. So if you're thinking it's my word versus his, you can see for yourself that in the aftermath of all this, Pepper is the one that lied about a huge number of vitally important details. So ask yourself, if you think I'm the one to blame, why would he need to do that? Why would he need to lie so much about what happened between us? Now, there is a controversy about this I need to address specifically. People going around with a deliberately misleading claim that I swung at him first, as if to imply that I was the one that started the fight and am to blame for it happening. Now, just as I had hit him to stop him from choking me out in the first incident, so too did I hit him in the second incident, because with him sitting on my chest, I was unable to breathe. To the best of my knowledge, from remembering what took place years ago, the first time I recall ever actually hitting him was after I was already on the ground with him sitting on my chest, unable to breathe and unable to get him off of me. However, Ranatoki claimed that after Pepper got in my face and was shoving me, that I swung at him first before we went to the ground. Let me propose to you this. This is a man who already has a violent history against me when he attacked me, forced his way into my bedroom, tried to choke me out, and made me afraid to live in my own home. And throughout my time living with him, not only was it clear that he was a severe alcoholic, but he showed repeated, blatant disregard for anyone but himself. Keep in mind, this is the same guy who during the peak of COVID, when the vaccine was scarce and reserved only for those who needed it the most, Pepper publicly advocated for cutting in line in front of vulnerable people to get the vaccine for himself. And even though at this point he hadn't been a teacher for quite some time, he used his teacher's status to pose as an essential worker so he could cut in line. He also lied about how he got fired from that very teaching job too. He claimed it was because he was gay. The reality of it is that his elementary music students found out about his horsecock song and were singing it in school. The parents found out about this and they were not happy. He got into a heated argument with one of the parents, which is when the school said that he either resigned voluntarily or he would be fired. I have personally seen him physically aggressive with others, ignoring their commands to stop. I have seen him argue with his own boyfriend on an almost daily basis and throw literal temper tantrums when he doesn't get his way. This man stands over half a foot taller than me and clearly has zero disregard for the consideration or well-being of others. So do you see how I might see it as incredibly threatening to me when he gets in my face, yelling at me and shoving me while shit-faced drunk? Even if I did swing first after he was shoving me and yelling in my face, it would have been in direct response to a person with a history of violence and physical aggression and a clear disregard for anyone but himself. Let's fast forward over 3 years later to Denver 2019. While I was at the convention, I encountered 6 separate individuals that all told me that they had heard about a, quote, gun incident involving me, but that I didn't seem like the kind of person that they had heard about. So I politely asked them what they had heard, and all of them told me some horrific bullshit version of the gun incident between me and Pepper, including accusations that I drunkenly pulled a gun on Pepper, or that I showed up to a party at his house with a gun. The things they were telling me that they had heard were insane and so far from the truth, and I'm glad they told me what they had heard. This is what made me aware of the rumors that were going around about me behind my back about the incidents with me and Pepper. About a month after Denver, I'm at a small party in Phoenix where I met a 7th person that had heard about the gun incident. They told me about the bullshit version they had heard that painted Pepper as the hero of the situation and me as a psychopath. Only this time, this 7th person told me that they heard it directly from Morgears, Pepper's boyfriend, because this 7th person was a coworker of Moore's at Bad Dragon. At this point, it was clear to me that Moore and Pepper were at least some of the people responsible for spreading malicious lies regarding what had happened in those incidents. After these events took place, and after I had washed my hands of it and moved on, they spent years lying about it, lying about me, and harassing me in order to preserve Pepper's reputation in the fandom. Up to this point, I had not yet gone public about what happened between us, and I had no intention of doing so because I just wanted Moore and Pepper out of my life. Yet they spent years trying to ruin my reputation behind my back because they knew if word got out, it could severely affect Pepper's music sales in the fandom. Remember when I asked earlier why Pepper would need to lie so much about our incidents where he claims himself the victim? Well, it's for the exact same reason why he's taken such a loud, extreme left-leaning stance on Twitter. It's all purely performative to boost his reputation and boost his otherwise tanking music sales. I had a very interesting dinner just before COVID hit, where I had a very long talk with one of Pepper's former financial managers, where they told me this directly. I will not name them for the same reason that they are a former manager. They've had their own share of run-ins with Pepper, and they do not deserve any stress or harassment from retaliation of what I'm saying here in this video. But if they choose to come forward on their own terms, I will support them 100%. About a month after Denver, I made a public statement on Twitter regarding these claims. At the time, I deliberately left my statement free of names or any identifying details about it involving Pepper, because my goal was purely to clear my name and not to stir up any drama or try to cancel anyone, and certainly not to gain clout, as he would later accuse me of doing. I just wanted all of this to be done with and for the lies he spread about me to stop. But he has a significantly bigger following than I do, so his subtweets and harassment were heard 100 times more than my voice was. It was a few weeks later that his harassment pushed me past my tipping point, and I decided to make it public that my statement was about him. He continued to harass me, though more directly now. Despite me having him blocked on Twitter, he would still tag me in his tweets so that people who replied to him would show up on my feed. He even went so far as to tag my After Dark Twitter account just to get to me. After years of spreading lies about what happened, he kept harassing me and would not leave me alone. To this day, I still see people tweeting about bullshit versions of what happened, falsely painting me as a psycho that pulled a gun on him or invading his home and attacked him. It's absolutely insane how far this shit has spread and how long it has lasted. For years, I tried ignoring it. I tried to clear my name. But because of his massive reach in this fandom, nothing I have done has worked to stop these malicious lies and this endless harassment. While I don't know if Pepper had any direct connection to the more recent false allegations made against me, the everlasting effects of his lies from years ago have directly influenced friends of his to spread even more horrific lies of events that I was no way involved in. This is why I needed to start by talking about my incidents with Pepper. Because even though it happened years ago and I have wanted so desperately to put it all behind me, it has had everlasting effects on me that I cannot get rid of. In regards to the call-out tweet, the first accusation against me that I want to address is in regards to one of the most infamous incidents known to the furry fandom, Kiro the Wolf's zoo sadism ring. For those unaware, zoo sadism is the act of engaging in sexual misconduct with dead or dying animals. In late 2018, it was brought to light that there were a handful of furries involved in these acts, and that they collectively shared their experiences with one another through private chats on Telegram. At the top of the list was, at the time, one of the more popular furry YouTubers, Kiro the Wolf. When these accusations surfaced, they were hard to believe. The acts that Kiro was accused of were the polar opposite of the image and reputation he had at the time in the fandom. And knowing that some people in the fandom have a history of making false claims to ruin others, at the time, many people had doubts on the claims, myself included. People in the fandom were shouting out accusations against Kiro left and right to an almost overwhelming degree. I, along with some of my friends, began digging through the mountain of accusations and evidence in an attempt to determine what was provably true, plausible, inadmissible as evidence, or just outright false. We first attempted to eliminate any claims that were provably false, or were inadmissible as evidence due to the potential of being easily faked. Seeing how many people were jumping to conclusions and spreading provably false rumors, we urged a sense of innocent until proven guilty until all the evidence could be accounted for. One example of a provably false claim that was being spread around was that there was a video of Kiro himself engaging in sexual acts with a dead deer. I viewed the video in question, and it was clear that the face seen in the video was not Kiro's. Now, to be clear, I am not saying this to dismiss or invalidate the legitimate accusations against Kiro. I'm merely pointing out how just the act of me weeding out the provably false accusations and maintaining a standard of innocent until proven guilty was enough to get me labeled as the guy that defended Kiro, as if to maliciously imply that I was defending the act of zoo sadism itself, when in reality, I was attempting to determine which accusations, if any, were actually true. Now, I will say that after I did examine the evidence, it is clear that at the absolute very least, Kiro was into the act of zoo sadism and likely physically carried out these acts. It is clear that through his own admission through the Telegram chat logs, at a bare minimum, he was certainly into it, and if his conversations to others are to be believed, he did carry out the physical act of it. This, along with the proven dishonesty he showed throughout these accusations, was enough for me to cut ties with him. I have not had any communication with him since these accusations dropped, nor do I ever intend to speak or interact with him again. Over 2 years later, in June of 2020, Twitter user Cuttlebone accused me of being involved in that zoo sadism ring. Despite posting absolutely no evidence to back this claim, they claimed I was in the chat logs and videos related to the zoo sadism ring. These accusations are false, not just because there's no evidence, but because what they claim about me being involved literally never happened. I was in absolutely no way involved in that zoo sadism ring. And like everyone else, I didn't even know it existed until the accusations against Kiro came out. The claim against me that I am a zoo sadist, or was in any way a part of it, is an outright malicious lie. The easiest proof for this I can give you is the fact that Mythical Red Fox, someone that grew to greatly dislike me because of my stance of innocent until proven guilty, and who frequently touted me as the guy that defended Kiro, would have absolutely said something back in 2018 if my name was anywhere in those evidence logs. Despite this, and despite zero evidence to back any of these claims against me, this did not stop people like Chipfoxx from spreading this claim as if it were true, using Cuttlebone's own tweet as his source. Chipfoxx is a good friend of Pepper's. He is also the one who repeatedly spread rumors about me that I was involved in allegations of human and animal rape perpetrated by multiple Bad Dragon employees. His justification for this was that because I was a Bad Dragon employee during the time when those allegations came to light, that I too committed these crimes. To clarify, with absolutely no evidence, he is claiming that just by being a Bad Dragon employee, that I am guilty of a horrific crime like rape. And that is enough for him to spread these claims repeatedly to over 10,000 of his Twitter followers as if it were true. Setting aside the insane authoritarian tactic of guilt by association, the biggest problem with his argument is the fact that I have never worked at Bad Dragon. But you know who does work for Bad Dragon? Pepper's boyfriend Moore and Pepper's friend Ranatoki. And for the record, no, that isn't doxing, because they both have it listed in their public Twitter profiles. Now, I'm not saying that Moore or Ranatoki are in any way guilty or associated with the things that I was accused of. But do you think Chipfoxx ever publicly accused them of being rapists just for working at Bad Dragon? Of course not. Because he knows the accusations are bullshit. He wouldn't accuse his friends of such horrible life-ruining things. Chipfoxx is knowingly weaponizing accusations of rape and zoo sadism because of how effective it is at ostracizing people in our fandom. As far as I can tell, the only sources he needed to spread these claims as absolute truth was first because some user named Expose the FV made this claim, again with zero evidence to back it. Or possibly, his source was from an anonymous account on Kiwi Farms. No, I am not joking. His source was from a website that was built with the purpose of trolling, harassing, and doxing people. This is the oldest source of this claim against me that I can find, before Chipfoxx picked it up and spread it, later using it to amplify the false accusations made by Cuttlebone. These amplified claims were then picked up by Phoenix the Blade to use as fuel to reignite their latest attempt to try and cancel me. So again, you have to ask yourself, why would he be so willing to do that to me? Why would he knowingly spread such life-ruining accusations based on absolutely zero evidence, and yet give a complete pass to his friends and people he likes? The short answer is because people like Pepper and Chipfoxx, and a few others in this fandom, are absolutely disgusting, dishonest, manipulative individuals that do not give a shit about truth and will gladly weaponize false accusations like rape, racism, and assault in order to silence anyone in our fandom that they don't like. It's also certainly possible that, just like Pepper with his music sales, Chipfoxx also has a financial stake in the fandom, seeing as his wife is the director and Chipfoxx is the producer of the documentary The Fandom. So naturally, he would want to be as popular as possible to financially benefit from their documentary, of which Pepper also created the music for the documentary. The sheer amount of outright misinformation and lies spread around our fandom, and specifically on Twitter itself, is insane. It doesn't matter that there was absolutely zero evidence to back such horrific claims against me. Chipfoxx, Pepper, and Phoenix the Blade, among others, still knowingly and willfully spread these false claims because they know their followers, furries who are overtly passionate to standing up to the evils in this world, would believe it without question and spread it without ever verifying it. That is the very nature of how Twitter functions. Even Boozy Badger touched on this subject, on how sensational tweets can be weaponized and spread instantly. Twitter is weaponized propaganda. It encourages folks to create headline sensationalism in 280 characters without explanation of an article. It is to be accepted as fact and then shared in seconds without regard for truth or accuracy. Boozy could not have been more accurate in his tweet. I want you to take a look at the sheer number of tweets from people like Chipfoxx, who seem to live their whole lives on Twitter. At his peak, it's literally thousands of tweets per month, averaging over 100 tweets every single day. And almost all of it is not their own content, but instead are retweets of politically charged articles and hot takes from other people. In fact, if you speed scroll through their timelines, you'll find that you've only gone back a few hours. With that massive amount of content, do you think for a second that anyone would actually have the time to read through 100 stories a day, let alone actually have the time to fact check their integrity before spreading them? Or do you think that instead, like Boozy said, people just see headlines and hot takes that fit their views and blindly retweet it without actually fact checking it? If people like Chipfoxx want to target someone in this fandom, they know that they can just create emotion-provoking hot takes with absolutely no context or evidence, and people will pick it up and spread it without even thinking twice about if it's actually true. And it will spread until it creates this idea in the back of everyone's minds that when they hear the name Karnyth, they associate it with the guy that defended Kiro, the guy into Zoo sadism, or the guy that pulled a gun on his roommate. And God forbid, if you try to stand up to the lies of the hate mob, you know damn well that they'll just label you as the guy that defended Karnyth. The next accusation I want to address is the claim of racism, or more specifically, the absurd claim that I, quote, constantly cite black on black crime as an excuse for police brutality. Where do I even begin with how stupid and untrue this accusation is? This is one of those accusations that I know is so fundamentally untrue and unfounded that if furries weren't so naive enough to believe it, I honestly would have found it fucking hilarious at how dishonest it was. Well, firstly, if I am, quote, constantly citing black on black violence to excuse police brutality, surely they would have shown a bunch of screenshots in their big Twitter rant about me. Except they don't, because they never fucking have. The two screenshots they showed that had any semblance of me even mentioning black on black violence had nothing to do with any kind of justifying of police brutality, because that's something I would never do. Both of those tweets were from a derailed conversation that ultimately ended up being about the Second Amendment. It started with me critiquing the bloodthirsty furry fandom who thought the best course of action to stopping transphobia was to bully Majira Strawberry out of going on the H3H3 podcast because Ethan Klein had once made a joke they deemed transphobic. Some rando quote tweeted me while on cruise control trying to justify the bullying by acting as if all of us here in the States were all facing some imminent impending doom. Admittedly, I should not have responded. I knew nothing productive was going to come from a Twitter conversation with someone immediately strawmanning an argument to justify bullying. But I did. I replied back with saying that unlike many countries where LGBT people can be legally murdered, at least here in the States, we have the right and ability to defend ourselves from those who would illegally murder us. They replied back with a calm, rational, and respectful no, I'm kidding, they strawmanned even harder this time. This time now claiming the police were murdering us too. Oh, and let's not forget to mention the school children for bonus points while we're at it. What does any of this have to do with wrongfully bullying Majira? I have no fucking clue, but here we are. At this point, the conversation devolved into purely about the Second Amendment rights of US citizens, oddly enough being fought against by someone that isn't even a US citizen at all. Now here's where I'm about to mention black on black crime. In their tweet, they wanted to place blame, quote, especially on police, for LGBT and people of color being killed by guns. That prompted my response, where I first pointed out that in the US, according to a CDC study, guns are used to stop or prevent crime 500,000 to 3 million times per year in the United States. I also took issue with them saying people of color are dying to guns, quote, especially by police. Because when you look at the statistics of, for example, black deaths by guns, there are far more deaths from crime than from police, unjustified or otherwise. Like, the numbers are not even remotely close. We're talking, for example, on average less than 300 black people killed per year by police, versus over 9,000 black people killed from gun violence. To say guns are killing black people, quote, especially by police, as opposed to general gun crime, is just flat out not true. But at no fucking point did I ever say that police abuse was justified because of black on black crime. That is 100% a malicious lie deliberately spread by the same people that I already showed you were shamelessly lying about me with life-ruining accusations like rape and zoo sadism. They tried to claim I was deleting all of the offensive tweets, and then gaslighting everyone into claiming they never existed in the first place. What a convenient fucking excuse for a complete lack of evidence from the people who I already showed you have been profusely lying about me. The screenshots they do have are all clearly full of shit, and yet the screenshots that would condemn me, they just happen to miss collecting? Or do you think it's far more likely that the people that have been lying about me are trying to gaslight you into believing that I'm gaslighting you? I'm not going to say that I've never deleted tweets before, but to imply that deleting tweets is somehow evidence of wrongdoing is absolutely absurd. Especially considering that in one breath, they fault me for deleting tweets, and in another breath, people fault me for not deleting tweets. You literally cannot win with people like this because no matter what, they will always assume malicious intent in literally anything that you do. They make the evidence fit the conclusion they've already drawn. Even when it comes to completely insignificant accusations, they still lie to try and defame me. Take, for example, they claim that in order to avoid repercussions on Twitter, I, quote, recently rebranded as a streamer. At the time of this call-out post, I had already been streaming on Twitch for years. There was no rebranding from Twitter to Twitch, but they lied to say I was rebranding to make it look like I was trying to avoid some kind of accountability. It's factually false and pure character defamation. Even if they tried to claim that it was when I changed from live camera streaming to being a VTuber, that still happened over a year before this call-out post. They also claimed I was trying to, quote, extort an audience by being apolitical. No, I stopped engaging in politics on Twitter because of the very sociopathic fucks like this that can't be reasoned with. The ones that always make the evidence fit their views, the ones that go on this platform and are perfectly okay with spreading life-ruining accusations and hateful rhetoric just so they can feel better about themselves. I learned very quickly that so many people on Twitter just flat out don't give a fuck about the truth. They only want someone to hate. And that's one of the biggest reasons why it's taken me nearly 2 years to finish this video, because of the insane levels of anxiety I have worrying that no one's going to give a shit about anything I have to say here, and that they'll keep spreading these horrific lies about me. Hell, they even tried to claim that I was, quote, hiding behind my fursuit to gain social capital. In the 4 years since I've become a streamer, and out of over 10,000 tweets I've posted since then, do you want to know how many times I've tweeted my own fursuit pictures? Out of over 10,000 tweets? 19 times. That averages only 1 tweet every 2.5 months. And as for streaming with my fursuit, out of the hundreds, if not thousands of streams I have done since 2019, I can count on one hand the number of times I've had my fursuit on stream. Literally every single accusation levied against me, down to the most minuscule of claims, is complete bullshit, factually false, and a brazen attempt at defamation. Like I said earlier, they don't need any of it to be true. They just need enough people to think at least some of it is true. Enough so that people distance themselves from me, and so that they can pressure others into doing the same as well. And even after nearly 2 years of being almost completely off my main Twitter and just doing my own thing, just trying to live my own life, they are still, to this day, trying to ruin me. Literally anyone new that I associate with, they go to them and they spread all this bullshit about me behind closed doors where I can't defend myself. It wasn't enough that they made me nearly kill myself 2 years ago, but now they want to make sure that I'm completely alone and that no one ever interacts with me again. This entire call-out thread made against me is complete bullshit. They know it's bullshit, but they still keep spreading it anyways because they don't give a fuck about whose life they ruin or who they drive to nearly fucking killing themselves so long as they get attention.
Ultimately, a genuine leader is not a searcher for consensus, but he's a molder of consensus. And on some positions, cowardice asks the question, is it safe? Expediency asks the question, is it politic? Vanity asks the question, is it popular? But conscience asks the question, is it right? And there comes a time when one must take a position that is neither safe, nor politic, nor popular, but he must do it because conscience tells him it is right.
Time after time, I saw people in our fandom spreading provably false viral stories on Twitter. Stories that would enrage or upset so many other furs with misinformation, making them think that things in the world were far worse than they actually were. Initially, I tried to shed light on the truth in hopes that just maybe it would help others realize how full of shit Twitter can be, and that they shouldn't be so emotionally invested into what they read on social media. So many people in our fandom were getting so upset over countless viral stories that I knew were flat out untrue, to a point I felt obligated to speak up in hopes of helping others realize that they don't need to let these stories upset them. But the more I did that, the more these sociopaths that capitalize on false accusations tried to paint me as an evil, hateful person because it went directly against them trying to peddle bullshit for clout. It baffles me how so many people just blindly believe the shit they see on Twitter and regurgitate it without a second thought. If it fits their pre-existing views or gives them fuel to hate someone or something they don't like, they eat it up and spread it without even thinking if it's true or the real-world consequences of spreading false information. I went from someone that was pro-Bernie in 2015 and repeating leftist talking points to someone that wants absolutely nothing to do with politics anymore. I want to tell you how I got to this point, and I'm going to be completely transparent and honest on where I stand and why. But for that, we need to go a little bit further back in the timeline. On August 9th, 2014, Michael Brown was shot and killed by Officer Darren Wilson in Ferguson, Missouri. This shooting quickly gathered overwhelming national attention because it was widely reported that witnesses claimed Michael Brown was on his knees with his hands up and was surrendering peacefully when he was shot and killed. These reports outraged people across the nation and led to mass protests in Ferguson and many other cities across the US. People started shouting chants like, "Hands up, don't shoot." This shooting is one of the first major incidents that helped give prominent rise to the Black Lives Matter movement, and even to this day, the slogan, "Hands up, don't shoot," is still used in some BLM protests. When I first heard the story, that Brown was murdered on his knees with his hands up, this enraged me. Twitter was filled with videos and tweets of people talking about how he was brutally gunned down and murdered, and like so many others, hearing that this kind of thing still happens to minorities in our country made me absolutely furious. But the more I paid attention to this story, the more and more conflicting information I kept hearing about what supposedly happened. On one side, the reported evidence said Michael Brown had attacked Officer Wilson in his car, and that he attempted to take Officer Wilson's gun, and that Brown was ultimately shot when he was charging at Officer Wilson. On the other side, you had Twitter users and several witnesses, including a friend of Michael Brown, saying that Brown did nothing wrong, that he had his hands up when Officer Wilson shot him, and that the police were making up all this evidence to cover up a murder. This is what ultimately led to the chant, "Hands up, don't shoot." At the time, I honestly didn't know who or what to believe, and with the Ferguson police not releasing much of any information to the public about this incident, at the time, I saw both sides as potentially being true. You had conflicting witness reports on one side, and a lack of information and transparency on the other. This is why, just a few days after the shooting took place, I signed a petition on whitehouse.gov to require police officers to wear body-worn cameras while on duty. I already knew that since their implementation in the 90s, dash cameras in police cars had a notable impact in reducing false police abuse complaints, as well as helped expose police misconduct and corruption. So I figured adding body cameras as well would provide much better and more direct information when it comes to police incidents. What we would learn months later was that a number of witnesses admitted to lying about what they saw, while other witness testimonies would debunk the claims that Brown had his hands up or ever tried to surrender.
More than 2 weeks after a St. Louis County grand jury did not indict Officer Darren Wilson in the killing of Michael Brown, new revelations about the evidence that drove their decision. Witnesses admitted to lying.
Some witnesses admitted they didn't actually see the shooting or only saw a part of the shooting or only repeating what they had heard on the street.
Others changed their story. The grand jury had to figure out who and what to believe. Thousands of pages of documents made public turn up several examples of testimony with little to no credibility. Witness 22, whose testimony was at first damaging to Officer Wilson, admitted she lied when pressed by investigators, eventually telling the grand jury, quote, "I just felt like I want to be part of something. I didn't see what I told the FBI." Testimony from witness 35 might have helped lead to an indictment of Officer Wilson, testifying that Michael Brown was, quote, "on his knees" when shot in the head by Wilson. But it wasn't true. The witness admits to making that story up. In one exchange, the prosecutor asked, "Are you telling us the only thing that's true about all of your statements before this is that you saw that police officer shoot him at point-blank range?" The answer, yes.
It is the mantra of a movement started in Ferguson, Missouri, after the shooting of unarmed black teenager Michael Brown by white police officer Darren Wilson. Hands up, don't shoot spread across America like wildfire, from Ferguson to New York to Los Angeles. Hands up, don't shoot! To the halls of Congress, to the NFL football field, even CNN contributors throwing up their hands. There's only one problem.
It's no good. It's not true. It is either based on a lie or based on a misinterpretation of what happened.
Federal and local authorities say the evidence shows hands up, don't shoot didn't happen. The final Department of Justice report concludes Michael Brown's hands were not up in surrender when he was shot and killed by Officer Wilson. So where did it come from? Brown's friend the day of the shooting.
His weapon was already drawn when he got out the car. He shot again, and once my friend felt that shot, he turned around and he put his hands in the air, and he started to get down, but the officer still approached with his weapon drawn, and he fired several more shots.
Federal and local authorities say he's wrong, but there are still plenty in the protest movement who are convinced Brown had his hands up. But few have read the nearly 100-page report. We did. Here's what the witnesses closest to the incident who spoke to federal investigators and the grand jury say. Witness 102, a biracial male, for sure that Brown's hands were not above his head. Witness 103, a black male, reluctant to meet with FBI agents, stating snitches get stitches, eventually did talk. He had one of the best views of the shooting and says he did not see Brown's hands up and witnessed Brown moving fast towards Wilson. Witness 104, a biracial female with a clear view of the scene, says she heard the shots fired inside Wilson's car that hit Brown in the hand. She then saw Wilson hop out of the car and yell, "Stop, stop, stop." Brown ran, then turned around, and for a second began to raise his hands as though he considered surrendering, but then quickly balled up his fist and charged at Wilson. In a stunning admission, she told investigators Wilson waited a long time to fire his gun, adding, "She would have fired sooner." Witness 105, a 50-year-old black female, says she noticed Brown put his hands up for a brief moment, but then turned around, made a shuffling movement, and put his hands down in a running position and ran towards Wilson. Most of this not made public until long after the shooting, and that was too late to silence the slogan.
Virtually every claim that Michael Brown was murdered while surrendering with his hands up was just flat out not true. Now, I'm not going to argue whether or not the shooting in its entirety was justified, but what stood out to me, what made me really think twice about how I look at incidents like this, was not just the huge amount of misinformation claimed about the shooting and how many witnesses admitted to lying about it, but more so the sheer volume in just how many people believed it without question and acted on it. It made me think, if this many people can be misinformed about a viral incident, myself included, what else might I not have been aware of? Over the next few years, as police body cameras became more widely used, so did access to easily viewing these videos on platforms like YouTube. YouTube channels like Police Activity quickly rose in popularity as they posted countless videos of police-involved incidents, such as car chases, arrests, and police shootings. And unlike other sources of police videos that may have narration, dramatic music, and creative editing to hype up emotions or paint a certain picture, the vast majority, and by that I mean almost all, of videos uploaded to this channel were straight up raw body cam and dash cam footage, oftentimes with multiple camera angles, and even paired with the recordings of the 911 calls that preceded the incidents. This channel has uploaded over 1,000 videos over the last 6 years showing both the good and bad sides of law enforcement. Everything from officers saving choking babies to exposing outright police abuse and corruption. This channel, in my honest opinion, is easily one of the most unbiased sources of police incident content available to the public today. I thought this was great. I had hoped that having such definitive, easily accessible evidence would shed light on police incidents and reduce the amount of misinformation being spread around. However, as time went on, I saw more and more outright false stories being spread around virally on Twitter, and people so outraged by them that trying to even talk about what really happened just made me a target for accusations of racism and bootlicking from people that very clearly had no idea what actually happened in any of these incidents. Again, with the nature of how Twitter functions, it is so incredibly easy to just make up a juicy, emotionally provoking story and have it go viral. In fact, it got to a point that anytime I would see viral tweets being spread around about police abuse incidents, and especially police shootings, this is the channel I would go to first to see if there was any raw, unbiased video in its entirety to see for myself what actually happened. And over the next few years, the more I looked into these incidents of police abuse, the more disturbed I felt. Because I saw firsthand that not only were police abuse issues worse than I originally knew about, but also I was again seeing firsthand the sheer volume of misinformation about justified police shootings being spread on Twitter and blindly believed by thousands of people without question, especially within our own fandom. Tweets with too good to be true stories, or deliberately cropped videos, or even just outright lies. It wasn't just one or two cases where Twitter got it wrong. No, it was an absolutely insane number of stories where the claims on Twitter in no way matched what the evidence and raw body camera footage showed. I was torn between genuinely wanting to help end police abuse while also not wanting to simultaneously give credence to the disingenuous actions of those willfully spreading misinformation. It became impossible to have an honest discussion about these incidents. I tried to stand up against this misinformation on Twitter, but that only put a target on my back by people that were either uninformed or, like the people I talked about earlier, were perfectly okay with spreading outright lies for attention. Here are just a few examples of some prominent stories I have personally seen other furries in our fandom retweeting and spreading around. Twitter claimed a man was shot in the back for nothing more than carrying a stolen pizza. The reality is that police were called because someone reported a man with a gun, and while running from police, he pulled a gun and was pointing it at an officer when he was shot. Twitter claimed police shot and killed James Garcia without warning while he was asleep in his car. Garcia was talking with police for over 10 minutes, providing false information and refusing all commands before he ultimately pulled a gun and pointed it at police. Verified Twitter user Sean King, with over 1 million Twitter followers, claimed that a Texas state trooper kidnapped and raped a woman, threatened to kill her and her husband, along with an egregious amount of other further accusations in his original posts. The nearly 2-hour-long raw body cam footage showed that every single accusation was 100% bullshit, never happened, and completely made up. Twitter claimed an unarmed homeless man was murdered by police. That man was armed with 2 knives, had just tried to kill a store employee, had a history of threatening to kill police officers. 10 officers spent 30 minutes trying to disarm him using multiple tasers, pepper spray, and beanbags, all before he again threatened to kill officers and charged at them with both knives in hand. Verified Twitter user Bandopop claimed police assaulted his brother just because a passenger was recording a video of their traffic stop. His brother had just committed 3 felony hit and runs, was driving recklessly while under the influence with 2 minors in the back seat, and repeatedly refused to show his hands or exit the vehicle when ordered to by police before police ever used force to remove him from the car. On top of verified Twitter accounts and celebrities spreading misinformation, even the NFL promoted honoring Sean Drajon Reed as if he was innocent. A guy who literally live streamed himself on Facebook indiscriminately shooting into random people's homes, and later streamed himself running from police while saying that he was going to shoot them before he pulled a gun and was shot for it. A tweet got over 200,000 likes, telling a lengthy and incredibly detailed story about a lady's boyfriend being pulled over and held at gunpoint for giving money to a homeless guy at 7-Eleven. It described the officers as extremely aggressive and unreasonable, all while pointing their guns at the boyfriend. After multiple plot holes in the story and a lengthy investigation of every agency in the surrounding areas, there wasn't a single piece of evidence to support anything in this story actually happening. No 911 calls, no police radio traffic, no dash cams or body cams, not even footage from the 7-Eleven. The traffic stop never existed, and every word of it was 100% made up. A reverend claimed that he was racially profiled when stopped by police. The reverend said the officer accused him of having drugs, was questioning why he was driving a nice car in a nice neighborhood, and even threatened to take the reverend to jail over nothing. The body camera footage of the entire incident showed that the reverend was flat out lying about everything. The officer was not only totally polite and professional, he even let the reverend off with a warning for his traffic violation. If we can't even trust a reverend to tell us the truth, who the fuck can we trust? Twitter claimed an officer threatened to shoot a mother because her 4-year-old child allegedly shoplifted a Barbie doll. In reality, both parents were shoplifting with their children present and fled from police in their car multiple times. Because they fled, it became a felony stop. When finally stopped, the driver and passengers refused to show their hands and were reaching around the car, hence why police drew their guns for the felony stop, which is standard procedure.
On May 27th, we respond to a call of individuals, adults, who are stealing property from a business. When officers go to make initial contact, they run out of the store. We make a traffic stop. As the vehicle is fleeing, the car stops. We arrest one lady who's charged with warrants later. The car flees again. From there, I get it.
Now, if one wanted to make the argument that during the stop, one of the officers was far too aggressive and only escalated the situation, I would agree with you. But that's not what the original claim was. The original claim that went viral was that all of this was only because a 4-year-old was stealing a Barbie. And that was a flat-out lie. This is something I have noticed, that even in cases where there are facts that support at least some claims of police abuse or misconduct or recklessness, the story itself is so massively exaggerated or lied about that it ends up not only undermining the injustice that happened, but it actively gives reason for people to just not give a shit about it. It blends in with all the other boy who cried wolf stories, and people end up dismissing it all the same. In fact, when you willfully spread misinformation and false stories that are easily debunked with body camera footage, who do you think benefits the most from that? Who do you think can take your easily debunked claims and then use it as fuel to turn people against you? I have legitimately seen people try to justify spreading misinformation because they think it raises awareness for civil issues, or because it builds hate towards groups that they don't like, such as police. But that begs the question, if the issues are as bad as you say, then why do you need to lie about it in the first place? The only people you're appealing to are the people in your bubble that already agree with you and are just as misinformed as you are. Everyone else, all the independents, all the evil centrists, all the fence-sitters, when they all see through the bullshit, they're the ones that are going to be easily coaxed to the side away from you. And the ones who were already on the other side will just have everything they already believe about you cemented and reaffirmed. They'll be exposed to every lie your side was complicit in spreading. They will see the sheer volume at which this misinformation is willfully spread by the hundreds of thousands. They will see you defending that misinformation to the death. The seeds of doubt and mistrust towards your side will be easily planted in their minds. And then some idiot in power can come along, and when their side doesn't get their way, he can claim that you've rigged the whole fucking thing against them. And those people, in their minds, from their perspective, will have every reason to believe it. I know this because it almost happened to me. After years of those furs spreading all those outright lies about me, in conjunction with them and so many others in the fandom spreading these provably false stories and not giving a shit about it, how can you even blame me for not wanting to associate myself with people like that? How can you be surprised that the only direction I had left to go was towards people like Steven Crowder? Before I knew anything about him, on the surface, it seemed like his Change My Mind series was at least an attempt at having civil conversations with others. Something that was openly condemned by the very people who spread all those life-ruining accusations about me, lying their ass off about so many things, while also claiming that the only reason someone would want these kind of open discussions is to spread hate speech. Even though I never did financially support Crowder, my tweet boasting about wanting to do so was a one-off comment driven by the anger and frustrations caused by the very people in this fandom pushing me to him in the first place. There was one time where I did defend him on Twitter in regards to accusations claiming he deliberately outed a trans person against their will by recording a public meeting regarding trans health issues. The information I had at the time was that it was during a public town hall type meeting open for anyone to attend, and as such, if one wanted to not be outed to their local community, the logical step would to not attend such a public event. What I didn't know at the time was that the meeting was taking place at a pride center in Vermont and had signs specifically banning any type of pictures or recordings, and that Crowder disobeyed this anyways with hidden cameras to make his video. So yeah, I'll admit, I got that one wrong. But that single mistake I made is absolutely not a reason to say I'm transphobic, especially when you consider the fact that I have always been supportive of my trans friends in any way that I can. The only difference is I talk to them directly. I don't go around parading it and virtue signaling about it on social media for attention. Case in point, during the peak of COVID, when a trans friend of mine was laid off from their job and financially struggling, I did not hesitate to offer them a room for free in my house until they got back on their feet. But you all would have never even heard about this if I didn't have to defend myself here, because it's none of your fucking business. I help people and I do the right thing because it's the right thing, not because it gets me likes on Twitter or views on Twitch. So this accusation that I'm transphobic that Chipfoxx and his friends have been repeating over and over is complete bullshit, just like all the other accusations they've made up about me.
Violence as a way of achieving racial justice is, I am convinced, both impractical and immoral. I'm not unmindful of the fact that violence often brings about momentary results. Nations have frequently won their independence in battle, but in spite of temporary victories, violence never brings permanent peace. It solves no social problems. It merely creates new and more complicated ones. Violence is impractical because it is a descending spiral, ending in destruction for all. It is immoral because it seeks to humiliate the opponent rather than win his understanding. It seeks to annihilate rather than convert. Violence is immoral because it thrives on hatred rather than love. It destroys community and makes brotherhood impossible. It leaves society in monologue rather than dialogue. Violence ends up defeating itself. It creates bitterness in the survivors and brutality in the destroyers.
There is one last topic I need to discuss, and it is a very touchy subject. But before I do, let me give a quick recap on everything I've discussed so far. I fully expect that the very same people that spread all of these horrific lies about me are going to deliberately take this next section out of context and use it as fuel to deter others from learning about all the other bullshit they've been spreading about me. Mark my words, it's not a matter of if they will, but how long until they do. Be on the lookout for phrases like, Karnyth is still defending this, or Karnyth is still defending that. They'll never have even watched this video, but they will try to dismiss it as saying it's just propaganda, or it's just using talking points, or some other dismissive argument. And if you've gotten this far, you'll obviously know that isn't true. This group lied about Pepper Coyote getting violent towards me and making me afraid to live in my own home. They completely made up me being involved in the zoo sadism ring with zero evidence. They lied about me being a bad dragon employee and raping someone. They completely lied about me making excuses for police brutality. They called me transphobic with zero evidence. They lied about me rebranding. They lied about me extorting an audience. They lied about me being apolitical. They even lied about me using my fursuit for clout. There is nothing these sociopaths won't lie about in order to ruin someone they don't like. These people are fucking monsters. They are disgusting, spiteful little shit stains that need to destroy others just so they can feel valid about themselves. And they're holding the fandom by the balls, making everyone too afraid to speak out against their bullshit, knowing full well they can and will weaponize absolutely any life-ruining accusation they want in order to ruin anyone that gets in their way of clout. So are you aware yet at just how easy it is for a platform like Twitter to spread such insane bullshit on a massive scale? Do you see how easy it is for people to weaponize life-ruining accusations with little to no evidence and have hordes of people piling on in order to ruin someone? I hope that you can understand that maybe, just maybe, stories you've heard or believed in the past might actually have room to have been total bullshit from the very beginning. It's not even close to the first time this has happened, let alone on a massive worldwide scale either. Do you remember the Nick Sandmann story? The group of kids that were accused of harassing an elderly Native American man with slews of hateful and racist rhetoric? Enough so that it caused celebrities to call for doxing them, only to later find out that all of the accusations were completely 100% made up and never happened. Mob mentality on Twitter has been plaguing the world as far back as I can remember, as early as the Coney 2012 incident, where so many people were on board with this movement only to later learn that the entire thing was one big grift. So hopefully you can understand just how easily you may have believed some huge national story on Twitter, only for it to later have been proven to be complete bullshit. Because we need to talk about the Kenosha shootings involving Kyle Rittenhouse. The very incident that when I tried to talk about what factually happened, It ultimately got me kicked out of the wild abandoned Twitch team because of this tweet that was completely ignorant of what actually happened and was trying to control others by guilting them for associating with me. And this was later used as another piece of fuel in this huge bullshit call out against me. Before I go into detail on what actually happened, let me put it into perspective for you. After about a year of calling him a murderer and claiming Kyle Rittenhouse was the instigator, even the Young Turks, a left-leaning and notoriously dishonest news organization, eventually admitted that the evidence was, as they put it, overwhelming that it was self-defense.
Kyle Rittenhouse's mother is upset that the Biden campaign used an image of her son, who murdered 2 protesters.
He murdered people. The murderer. The murderer, he shot at 3 people and murdered 2.
Kyle Rittenhouse, he murdered 2 people, by the way.
Murder protesters. He assumed that he gets to murder people. Blatant murder. Kyle Rittenhouse.
Yep.
Murdered these people. Murderers like Kyle Rittenhouse. Kyle Rittenhouse murdered them. They're like, oh, you went to go kill black people. And then at that Black Lives Matter protest, you murdered a couple of people. Bravo, way to go, murderer. If he gets out of jail, maybe he can murder more people.
The Washington Post is having a sit down with Kyle because we want to know what a murderer is thinking. We shouldn't. I don't want to hear what he has to say, right? I don't want to hear what he has to say. He's a criminal, a cold-blooded murderer. If he would have been black, he would have been under the jail. He bought a weapon to murder people.
Kyle Rittenhouse, yes, here's $2 million to help you with your murder. He murdered people on the left. Hey, guys, by the way, I murdered a bunch of people, threatened to murder people, and then sometimes murder people. And then the right winger, oh, it's a poor white guy. Poor right winger. Of course it's self-defense. Of course it's self-defense.
One eternity later.
The evidence, in my opinion, is so overwhelmingly in support of the self-defense argument that Kyle Rittenhouse is making that we really don't need the judge to chime in the way he's been chiming in lately. But nonetheless, he can't help himself.
The whole debate around the shooting isn't even a matter of left versus right politics. It's about fact versus fiction, about who is capable of reasonable deduction of facts versus who just mindlessly follows ideological narratives. Even huge left-leaning streamers like Destiny, someone who is known for debating and debunking far-right propaganda, received major pushback from the left when he actually engaged in the facts of the case rather than towing political lines.
Okay, hold on. First of all, Kenosha was not having a problem with policing, okay? The man that was shot by the cops and paralyzed, absolutely, the cops were 1,000,000% in the right, okay? It's not even remotely debatable.
He got shot like 7 times in the back.
Absolutely, yeah, 100%. Absolutely in the right. The cops had...
I wish I'd looked.
No, because you're black pilled on the justice system, and you just think it's fucking perfect the way it is.
No. So the problem is the problem is that people like you, Vivian, and other people on the left that have these huge ideological narratives don't even bother to look at the facts of the case. The reason why 2 people are dead in the Rittenhouse riots is directly because of people like you that stoke the flames and get people upset about policing in the United States over cases where the police were 100% in the right. You are engaging in a form of stochastic terrorism when you are on here stoking these flames, just as much as somebody like Lauren Southern does. I need you to understand that you are the exact same type of person. You are exactly the same as her. I need you to understand that, Vivian. You are exactly the same as somebody like Lauren Southern when you're on here stoking the flames. 100% you are.
Here's the recap of what happened. Jacob Blake had a restraining order for sexually assaulting a woman. He violated that restraining order, and the woman called the police on him. While the police were attempting to detain him, Jacob Blake tried to walk away while pulling out a knife. The police tried to tase him twice, but the tasers failed. In the original video, you can even hear the officers shout several times, "Drop the knife." He tried to flee the police by getting into a car that belonged to the woman that had the woman's children in the back seat, which is when an officer grabbed him by the shirt. Jacob Blake tried to stab the officer with his knife, which is when he was shot. The narrative that spread around virally was that the police shot and killed an unarmed black man in Kenosha, Wisconsin, who was just trying to break up a fight. A complete fabrication of what actually happened. This prompted several nights of riots and massive property damage in Kenosha. The obvious problem with the narrative that went viral is that, 1, Jacob Blake was not unarmed, and 2, he was not killed. He is still alive. And in fact, despite the car door blocking the view, we know he attempted to stab the officer before getting shot because he himself admitted to it. The shooting of Jacob Blake was absolutely justified for 2 reasons. The first being the most obvious, in that he was actively trying to stab an officer with a knife. The second is that he was attempting to flee in a stolen car from police with children in the back seat that would have put them in grave danger. But the narrative that spread was that he was unarmed and killed while trying to break up a fight, and that it was an unjustified murder. This is what prompted the Kenosha riots that ultimately led to Kyle Rittenhouse shooting 3 people, killing 2 of them. In fact, there was even misinformation on who Rittenhouse shot. Claims that he killed black men during the BLM protests went viral, and that it was racially motivated, even though everyone he shot was white. In the aftermath of the shooting, there were countless claims that he was a white supremacist and part of a group called the Kenosha Guard that went to Kenosha to confront the rioters. The Anti-Defamation League even confirmed that Rittenhouse was not a part of that group, nor did he have any known ties to any extremist groups at all. And then after the shooting, Kyle was seen at a bar with some members of the alt-right group, the Proud Boys. People jumped on this immediately and assumed that it was irrefutable proof that Kyle did have alt-right ties. Except the problem with the argument is that at the time, Kyle had absolutely no idea who any of those guys were, let alone that they were a part of the Proud Boys. The meeting in the bar was set up by one of his first lawyers, John Pierce, who was a massive Trump fan and had been staging these photo ops and meetings without Kyle's knowledge. This is the same lawyer who took the $2 million raised for Kyle's legal defense and used it for his own benefit before Rittenhouse ultimately fired him. The first person Rittenhouse shot was Joseph Rosenbaum. Rosenbaum had a lengthy criminal record, including serving over 10 years in jail for sexually assaulting a child. He had only just been released from a mental hospital earlier that same day, and in video evidence as well as witness testimony, it was clear that during the riots, he had been challenging others to fights while calling several other people the N-word, despite himself being white.
Fuck you with everything you got. Shoot me, nigga. Shoot me, nigga. Bust on me, for real.
It was even testified in court that Rosenbaum was responsible for setting fires. To say that this man was there as a peaceful BLM protester, or on the side of BLM at all, is just flat out not true. It's pretty clear to say that Rosenbaum was not out there peacefully protesting, he was a rioter. And he was instigating fights with several people. Multiple witness testimony at trial claimed that Rosenbaum had not only been trying to instigate fights, but he was also making verbal threats to Rittenhouse and others, saying, quote, "If I get you alone, I'm going to kill you." Rosenbaum had been hanging around with another person, Joshua Zeminski. Zeminski was the one encouraging Rosenbaum's behavior, and he was the one that fired the warning shot in the air while Rosenbaum was chasing after Rittenhouse.
Right before he turned around, I'm not sure if this was a reason why he turned around, but there was a gunshot, and that's actually visible on video. It's not clear whether or not that gunshot was fired into the air or towards Rittenhouse, but Rittenhouse did turn around immediately after that. And at that point, he went from running away to aiming his weapon at Rosenbaum, and I was actually directly behind Rosenbaum. So I took 1 or 2 steps to my right as Rosenbaum was lunging for the barrel of the rifle.
When Rosenbaum was chasing after Rittenhouse, it's entirely understandable that Rittenhouse was in fear for his life, based on how unstable and violent Rosenbaum had been acting towards him and others. After Rosenbaum was shot, Rittenhouse immediately started running down the street to where a bunch of police were at to get help. A mob began chasing after Rittenhouse purely based on the call to action by Zeminski. Even though Rittenhouse was surrounded by dozens of people, the only people he shot or shot at were the ones that directly attacked him, including Anthony Huber, who had hit Rittenhouse in the head with a skateboard after he fell to the ground. After Huber fell from being shot fatally through the heart, Gage Grosskreutz approached Rittenhouse holding a handgun but had his arms up in the air. It wasn't until Grosskreutz pointed his gun at Rittenhouse that he was shot in the bicep. It was Grosskreutz' own testimony where he admitted that Rittenhouse did not shoot him until he pointed the handgun at Rittenhouse. Just based on the early evidence alone, it looked exceedingly likely that the shooting was self-defense when you see a mob chasing after him saying they are going to kill him, and out of the dozens of people surrounding him, the only people he shot were the ones that directly attacked him. But the narratives quickly began to spin up to try and paint Rittenhouse as the instigator for the whole thing, claims including that he went there with the intent to kill BLM protesters. If Rittenhouse was there with the intent to commit a mass shooting, it makes no sense that he wasn't shooting at any of the dozens of people around him, only the guy who attacked him initially, and then only the 3 people that attacked him after the mob was calling to kill him. The early claim against Rittenhouse was that he traveled across state lines with a rifle, and that he had no business being in Kenosha at all.
August 24th, Rittenhouse went up to the Kenosha area for his job as a lifeguard.
Rittenhouse crossed state lines into a community that was not his.
My grandmother, my aunt, my uncle, and cousins all live in the city of Kenosha.
You know, you've got this young white kid defending the community that he's not even from.
What's your father's name?
Michael Rittenhouse. He lived in Kenosha.
The teenager drove from his home in Illinois,
approximately 1 mile to Wisconsin,
across state lines, driving across state borders. He's driving across state lines.
Across the state line, across state lines,
across state lines, across state lines.
If you look at the Rittenhouse case, he crossed state lines. Drives up to events.
Across state lines.
Came across state lines.
Kyle Rittenhouse, who traveled across state lines.
From out of state, out of his own state.
Came across state borders. Whenever you have a situation where a 17-year-old is crossing state lines,
the state that he does not live in. He traveled there from out of state. He crossed state lines, meaning he traveled across state lines.
The 17-year-old who crossed state lines.
Now again, he drove from Illinois to Wisconsin.
The 17-year-old from out of state who shows up to Kenosha, Wisconsin.
He crosses a state line, drives 30 minutes into Kenosha.
Remember, he came across the line.
He crossed state lines.
Cross state lines.
Across state lines. He crossed state lines.
This claim was used as a means to try and make it look like he went there with the intent to harm others, but the evidence and context show that this was absolutely not the case. Rittenhouse lived in Illinois, right on the border of Kenosha, Wisconsin. He worked in Kenosha, his best friend lived in Kenosha, and most of his family lived in Kenosha. And the rifle that he owned and used was already being stored in Kenosha. To say that he crossed state lines with a rifle was not only a factually false red herring, but he never even had the rifle with him when he crossed the border, because as I said, it was already being stored in Kenosha. He went to Kenosha unarmed to help with cleaning graffiti and clean up after the first night of rioting. It wasn't until the second night of rioting started that his friend brought him his rifle when he and others were asked by a minority family to help protect their business from the rioters, the infamous car dealership where Rosenbaum was shot and killed. The claim that Rittenhouse had no business being in Kenosha or to defend property, and that he was just there looking for a fight, was just flat out not true. As I mentioned, the minority family that owned that business, which had already been partially destroyed on the first night, asked Kyle and others to help them protect their livelihood for the second night. People have argued that protecting property is pointless and stupid, dismissing it as killing people over property, as if it were just some static, meaningless object. But what they fail to realize is that it is much, much more than that.
These are f***ing people who live in public housing! And you just made a f***ing melee! You took down bus routes! There are people who live in this neighborhood who have to go back uptown to work! And you are here profiting off of our f***ing pain! So you f***ing protest every single last one of you! You think about what it's like to be a black woman in this f***ing neighborhood who lives with people in public housing who now have f***ing shit to walk through, who bag your groceries, who drop off your food, who defend you, who go uptown to a f***ing hospital to serve this community. So as you're out here You can protest all you want, but the I just saw take place. I know there are people out here, homeless people, who rely on those banks to charge their phone. And you think it's okay to take down a neighborhood? You don't see corporations here. There are human beings that live in this goddamn neighborhood. You do this in Harlem, you do this in Brooklyn, and I swear on everything. These people in this neighborhood deserve better. And I'm not talking about the gentrification. I'm not talking about the students who come here and pay cash to go to NYU. I am talking about the people who go to a methadone clinic down the goddamn street. And you think this is a protest? I gave my blood, sweat, and tears for this country. I served this country for 10 goddamn years. So when you think about this anger and this rage, because there's a way to get answers. Every single last one of you better be registered to vote. Yes, ma'am. Every single last one of you.
We are. Yeah.
So do me a favor, for every single person out here protesting, remember, there's 3 homeless men who rely on that as a charging station. And what? Will it even work now? For the sake of what? So you can go back home to your comforts. Sit in your house and think that you did some work today. There are people out here who work in these bodegas, who are security officers, who are maybe not descendants of slavery, but came over here as immigrants to do their jobs.
So great, everybody's.
And you created an unsafe goddamn environment. And I am tired of it. I don't care how you decide to organize and protest, but you don't riot. You don't burn in my goddamn neighborhood. I am a resident here. And you will realize this resident doesn't look like any of you. Because she is black. She has a right to be mad. But when you come in here with your privilege and you take down resources that my community needs.
It's not just objects being destroyed, it's people's livelihoods. It's their ability to pay their bills, to feed their families, to make a living in this unfair world. It's the accumulation of everything they have worked for their entire lives, working countless hours, day in and day out, just trying to make ends meet. You burn down a Target because Target can rebuild. And yeah, maybe $1 billion company can, but you don't stop to think what happens to the dozens of people that worked there that are now out of a job. Dozens of people that were just trying to get by, living paycheck to paycheck, that now have no income. Or you think that insurance will magically pay for all the damages, not realizing just how many small businesses don't even have insurance because they can't afford it. Or because business was so bad during the lockdowns that they had to cut it from their expenses. And even if they do have insurance, it can take months, if not years, before they would be rebuilt and able to sustain themselves again. The reality is, if a small business gets destroyed, it usually stays destroyed.
Today, we found Corboy Bala, who invested his life savings into opening this sports bar, cleaning up. While our camera was there, looters came back to try to steal his safe.
Right, trying to steal the safe.
I don't know what we're gonna do. We're gonna work so hard to get here. So hard.
It was a long process just getting where I was as far as with the business. And to just see it go away in a split of a day was kind of crazy. So it still feels like a dream, actually.
Do you have insurance?
No, I didn't have insurance at the time when it happened.
So have you lost everything?
Yep, I did lose everything.
You can see in the surveillance video windows being broken out during the chaos in Chicago's South Loop late Saturday night. Looters ducking in to take what they can.
I could see the glass being completely just shattered, blown out by some object that they threw through the window.
Owner Adrienne Alvarez and her husband compelled to come to their Orange Theory fitness franchise in the early hours of Sunday morning.
We weren't necessarily trying to defend the business, but we wanted to go clean up. We wanted to let people know we were in support. We wanted to just be there.
But as her husband Ralph was trying to clean up outside, Alvarez says she turned to see him on the ground in front of a large crowd, unconscious.
I started to scream. I tried to wake him. He wouldn't wake back up. And I tried to call for the police. No one was picking up. I tried to call from the phone in there. No one was picking up. And people just kept coming by and just looking at him, and I wanted him to wake up.
When she went to help him, that's when she says she was attacked.
A woman came out of nowhere and hit me over the back with a crowbar.
Alvarez finally got through to 911 on her cell phone. She says her husband was taken to Stroger Hospital with a serious head injury.
The people that did this, the people that I saw, they weren't protesters. Protesters have a cause. This is a struggle. We're angry. We're angry at what is happening. But this is our city. They're tearing, whoever this is, looters, they are tearing it down.
Several restaurants on this block have been reduced to rubble, including an Indian restaurant owned by father and daughter, Ruel and Hafsla Aslan.
Right there, that's our kitchen, main kitchen. This area, there's a main dining area.
They were featured on Guy Fieri's Diners, Drive-Ins, and Dives in 2016.
You're gonna love it. This is Gandhi Mahal.
Now it's a complete loss.
You said Black Lives Matter. Why don't you choke me? I'm black.
Tell him, sister.
Look what you did to my store.
Tell him, sister.
Look, we've been here all night cleaning up. All night cleaning.
And you got black people standing right here with them.
Tell me,
that's right.
Black Lives Matter.
Exactly.
You lied. You wanted to loot the store. You needed money. Get a job like I do. Stop stealing. This is the neighborhood. We're trying to build it up, and you tearing it down.
Carol, we're in Kenosha's Uptown neighborhood. One man describes it as the heart of the city's black community. The street, which was lined with businesses, now that you look at it today, they are all, nearly all of them, were reduced to rubble. In the middle of a social justice movement, civil unrest hit Kenosha's Uptown area. Local businesses left in pieces and ashes. By 11 a.m., firefighters were still dousing a building with water.
Look at this.
This is crazy. Like, my job is gone. My job is gone.
Marcus Starks shared a cell phone video of the Uptown pantry where he works. The store left in shambles. He says neighbors rely on them.
This is what they want to do. They want to take away from what they stand for, what they want to protest for. This is what they do. These people didn't deserve to lose their businesses.
At first you feel anger, then sadness.
Abel Alejo owns a market across the street. The market, along with many other businesses, went up in flames.
It's hard to describe because it's not the loss of material property. When you have a business like this, it's part of you. Part of your life goes with it. And when you lose it, part of your life goes with it.
Abel and many others here understand the outrage over the police shooting of Jacob Blake, but believe there has to be another way to make change.
When rioters destroy neighborhoods and cities, they aren't just hurting billion-dollar corporations that can rebuild on a whim. They are destroying the very means people use to live and survive. So if you want to mock someone for helping a minority family protect their livelihood from rioters that are pissed off over a completely justified police shooting, you go right ahead. But don't stand there and act like you give a shit about minority people more than you care about feeling good about yourself. Your obedience in towing political lines has blinded you from the objective reality of these situations. It should be apparent to any sane individual that destroying minority livelihoods while claiming to be standing up for minorities is so beyond fucked up. They say that Rittenhouse shouldn't have been there, but the irony of it is that the rioters were the ones that had absolutely no business being in Kenosha, destroying the city, destroying people's homes, destroying people's businesses, and destroying their livelihoods over a completely justified police shooting. Rittenhouse had infinitely more reason to be in Kenosha than any of the rioters destroying the city. So yeah, the argument of he shouldn't have been there is complete bullshit. The argument that he instigated the fight is complete bullshit. Just like how the Young Turks eventually admitted it, even though it was very clear from the beginning, the evidence is overwhelming that this shooting was self-defense. And the additional evidence that came out up to and during the trial only cemented that fact. As Destiny put it, this whole event is a great litmus test to find out who is capable of actually looking at the facts versus who just blindly follows political ideologies. And what's worse, at least within our fandom, we have clout-chasing ignorant children that try to ostracize anyone that doesn't follow mindless narratives and ideologies, even when they are completely in the wrong. You either toe the line, or they'll make sure they get everyone else to hate you and denounce you, even if that means they have to make up complete bullshit life-ruining accusations to ruin you. The only thing people like this want is control over others, so they can feel good about themselves. It's a small number of people in our fandom doing this, but there is no line they won't cross. There is no false accusation they won't weaponize. There are no morals they value because there is no integrity they possess. They'll guilt you for not hating who they hate. They'll threaten you with disavowment unless you disavow who they tell you. And they have absolutely no regard for human life. The only thing they value is control over others. And until people start standing up to them, they will destroy anyone they can to get what they want.